You have 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't fire every single person in this room. The words hung in the boardroom air as I watched 12 faces drain of color around the mahogany table. My stepsister Victoria's perfectly manicured hand trembled against her coffee cup. My stepbrother James loosened his tie like it was choking him. And my adoptive father Richard Hartwell sat frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. The contract spread across the table told the story they'd never seen coming. Rivera Holdings had just acquired Hartwell Industries. Lock, stock, and every overpriced barrel. You know what they say about karma? It doesn't just come knocking. Sometimes it buys the whole damn house and changes the locks. Hey everyone, hope you're doing well wherever you're watching from. Whether you're dealing with family drama, workplace politics, or just trying to figure out where you belong in this world, this story is for you. How's the weather treating you today? I hope it's better than the storm that's about to hit the Hartwell family boardroom. My name is Lana Rivers. This is the story of how I went from being the unwanted charity case, scrubbing their floors, to becoming the woman who owns the building they work in. Picture this. The same people who used to hand me their dirty dishes now hand me quarterly reports with my signature at the bottom. But let me start from the beginning. I was 22 when I believed family meant something. I actually thought that if I worked hard enough, loved deeply enough, and proved myself worthy enough, the Hartwells would finally see me as more than their good deed. I believed that blood didn't make family, that love did. I believed that my little skincare business would make them proud. I believed that Victoria calling me sister actually meant something. God, I was stupid. The Hartwells took me in when I was 8. Not out of love, mind you. Richard needed a tax write-off and a story for his political campaign. Look how generous I am adopting this poor orphan girl. The photo ops were endless. Me in my uncomfortable new dresses, trying to smile while Victoria pinched my arm behind my back. Me at their charity galas, the living proof of their compassion. What the cameras never showed was Victoria making me redo her homework because charity cases should be useful. Or James telling his friends I was the maid's daughter when they came over. Or Richard reminding me daily that I should be grateful for the opportunities, while handing me a list of chores that somehow never made it to his biological children. But I stayed grateful. I stayed hopeful. Because where else was I going to go? When I turned 18, I started making skincare products in the basement. Natural ingredients, organic processes, something I'd learned from YouTube videos and library books. My skin had always been sensitive, and I couldn't afford the expensive products Victoria used, so I made my own. They worked. They worked really well. I thought maybe this was my chance. My way to contribute something meaningful to the family business empire. Richard owned Hartwell Industries, a mid-sized manufacturing company that made everything from industrial cleaning supplies to basic beauty products. Nothing special, nothing innovative, but it paid for the mansion and the cars and Victoria's shopping addiction. I presented my skincare line to Richard on a Tuesday. I'd spent months perfecting the formulas, designing packaging, even creating a business plan with projected profits. I called it River's Edge, a play on my last name and a nod to new beginnings. Richard looked at my presentation for exactly 37 seconds. Lana, honey, he said, not looking up from his newspaper. This is sweet, really. But you don't understand business. You don't understand what real customers want. Maybe stick to helping around the house? You're good at that. Victoria laughed from the doorway where she'd been eavesdropping. Did the charity project just try to teach Daddy about business? That's adorable. Lana, you realize you're talking to someone who built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing, right? Maybe focus on things more your speed. Like cleaning. You're excellent at cleaning. James joined in from behind her. Remember when she tried to improve Mom's cookie recipe? Even the dog wouldn't eat those. They all laughed. Even Richard chuckled behind his paper. I stood there holding my presentation, my face burning with embarrassment, and something inside me cracked. Not broke. Cracked. Like a dam that's been holding back water for years and suddenly develops that first thin line. You're right, I said quietly. I should stick to what I know. What they didn't know is that what I knew was how to disappear. Within 6 months, I was gone. No dramatic goodbye, no burning bridges, no angry confrontation. I simply packed my few belongings, left a note thanking them for their generosity, and walked out of the Hartwell mansion forever. Victoria found the note first. I know because she called me laughing. Running away, charity girl? Good luck surviving in the real world without daddy's money. Don't come crawling back when you realize you're nothing without us. I never called back. I never looked back. For 3 years, I might as well have vanished from the face of the earth. The Hartwells stopped asking about me after the first few months. Why would they? I was just the adopted daughter who couldn't handle the real world. What they didn't know was that I'd taken my River's Edge formulas with me. What they didn't know was that I'd been secretly saving every penny from my allowance for years. What they didn't know was that their rejection hadn't broken me. It had freed me. But here's the thing about family secrets, they always surface eventually. And the Hartwells were about to learn that the girl they dismissed as a charity case had been very, very busy during those 3 years of silence. The same week Victoria got engaged to some trust fund brat, the same month James finally convinced Richard to make him vice president of operations, the same quarter that Hartwell Industries posted their best numbers in 5 years, I walked back into their lives. Not as Lana Rivers, the grateful adopted daughter. As Lana Rivers, the CEO who just bought their entire world. Victoria's coffee cup shattered against the marble floor. The first time I called Richard Dad was 3 months after the adoption papers were signed. I was 8 years old, standing in his study wearing a new dress that Victoria had helped me pick out. The dress was too big and the wrong color for my skin, but I thought it made me look like I belonged. Dad, can you help me with my math homework? Richard looked up from his computer, and for just a second, I saw something flicker across his face. Not warmth exactly, but maybe surprise. Like he'd forgotten I lived there. Sure, sweetheart. Just give me a few minutes to finish this email. I waited 47 minutes. I know because I counted every single one on the grandfather clock in the corner. When his assistant came in to remind him about his dinner meeting, I quietly slipped out. He never asked about the homework again. But I kept trying. The thing about being an orphan is that you learn to read people's faces like survival depends on it. Because sometimes it does. You learn which social worker is having a bad day, which foster parent is one tantrum away from sending you back, which kids in the group home will share their snacks, and which ones will steal yours. With the Hartwells, I thought I'd finally found my safe place. Richard seemed genuinely kind during those first few weeks. He'd ask about school, compliment my grades, even took me shopping for new clothes when he noticed everything I owned was secondhand. You're part of our family now, he told me that first month, ruffling my hair after I'd aced another spelling test. We take care of our own. I believed him completely. Victoria was 13 then, already beautiful in that effortless way rich girls are beautiful. Perfect blonde hair, perfect teeth, perfect everything. I worshipped her. When she offered to teach me how to do my makeup, I thought it meant she accepted me as her sister. What I didn't notice was how she always waited until her friends came over to play dress up with me. How she'd do my makeup just a little too heavy, my hair just a little too messy, so I looked ridiculous when her friends saw me. They'd giggle and whisper, and Victoria would put her arm around me and say, "Isn't she sweet? She tries so hard." I thought she was protecting me from their judgment. I thought the arm around my shoulders meant love. James was 16 and mostly ignored me, which felt like a blessing compared to some of the foster brothers I'd had. He wasn't cruel, just indifferent. Sometimes he'd even defend me when Victoria got too obvious with her little cruelties. "Leave her alone, Vic. She's just a kid." I thought that made him my ally. The household staff were kinder to me than the family ever was. Maria, the housekeeper, would sneak me extra cookies and let me help her with small tasks. She taught me how to fold fitted sheets and remove stains, skills that would prove more valuable than anything I learned in the private school Richard enrolled me in. You have good hands, Mija, Maria would say when I helped her with the laundry. Strong hands. Smart hands. Don't let anyone tell you they're not good enough. I didn't understand what she meant then. The first real betrayal came when I was 12. I'd made friends with a girl at school named Sarah Chen. She was funny and smart and didn't care that I was adopted or that my clothes weren't as expensive as everyone else's. For the first time since moving in with the Hartwells, I felt normal. Sarah invited me to her birthday party. It was going to be at her house, nothing fancy, just pizza and movies and sleeping bags in the living room. I was so excited I could barely contain myself. Can I go? I asked Richard at dinner. It's just for one night, and Sarah's mom already said yes. Of course you can go, Richard said. It sounds fun. Victoria looked up from her phone. Sarah-chan? Isn't she that weird Asian girl who brings those smelly lunches? Her lunches aren't smelly, I said quickly. Her mom makes really good dumplings. Ew. Victoria wrinkled her nose. Lana, you know you represent our family now, right? People see you with certain types of people, and they make assumptions. I felt my stomach drop. What do you mean? James looked uncomfortable. Vic, come on. I'm just saying, Victoria continued, maybe Lana should be more selective about her friendships. We have a reputation to maintain. Richard said nothing. He just kept eating his steak, like this conversation wasn't happening. I went to the party anyway. It was the best night I'd had in years. Sarah's family was warm and loud, and they actually listened when I talked. They asked about my interests, my favorite books, what I wanted to be when I grew up. For 8 hours, I felt like I mattered. When I got home the next day, Victoria was waiting in my room. Did you have fun with your little friend? She asked sweetly. Yeah, it was great. Good. Because Sarah called while you were there. My heart stopped. What? She called looking for you. Something about forgetting to tell you that the party was cancelled. Victoria's smile was sharp. I told her you couldn't come to the phone because you were busy. I also mentioned that you'd probably outgrown sleepovers anyway. You know, now that you're part of a more sophisticated family. I stared at her. But I was at the party. I was literally there. Were you? Because I got the impression from Sarah that she was pretty hurt you didn't show up. Something about waiting for hours and you never coming. The blood drained from my face. You called her back. You told her I wasn't coming. Victoria's innocent expression never wavered. I have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe there was some miscommunication? These things happen. I called Sarah immediately. The phone rang 6 times before her mom answered. Oh, Lana, Mrs. Chen said, and her voice was cold. Sarah is very disappointed in you. She waited until midnight for you to show up or at least call. I think it's best if you don't contact her anymore. But Mrs. Chen, I can explain. The line went dead. I never got to explain. Sarah wouldn't take my calls, wouldn't talk to me at school. Within a week, she was telling people I was a flaky rich girl who thought she was too good for her old friends. I went to Richard. Surely he would help me fix this misunderstanding. Dad, Victoria did something really mean to Sarah, and now. Lana. Richard held up his hand without looking away from his computer. Victoria is my daughter. I'm not going to listen to accusations against her from someone who's been in this family for 4 years. Maybe instead of pointing fingers, you should ask yourself why you're having trouble maintaining friendships. That's when I learned my first real lesson about the Hartwell family hierarchy. Blood mattered. Money mattered. And I had neither. But I kept trying to earn my place. I threw myself into being the perfect daughter. Perfect grades, perfect behavior, perfect gratitude. I helped Maria with housework without being asked. I never complained about Victoria's little cruelties or James's indifference. I smiled in family photos and never mentioned feeling lonely. When I turned 16, Richard gave me a small allowance for personal expenses. $50 a week, which felt like a fortune to someone who'd spent 8 years in foster care where an extra dollar was a miracle. This is to teach you financial responsibility, he explained. You'll learn the value of money by managing your own budget. What I learned was that $50 a week was exactly what they paid Maria per day. but I saved every penny I could. Not because I was planning anything, but because financial security felt like emotional security. If I had money, maybe I'd have value. Maybe I'd have a place in this family that couldn't be taken away. By the time I turned 18, I'd saved almost $4,000. It felt like all the money in the world. That's when I started the skincare experiments. Not because I had grand business ambitions, but because I was tired of Victoria making fun of my cheap drugstore face wash every time we shared a bathroom. I was tired of feeling like everything about me was inferior, inadequate, wrong. The first batch of face cream I made was just for me. But it worked better than anything I'd ever used. My skin, which had always been sensitive and prone to breakouts, cleared up completely. Maria noticed first. Mija, what are you using on your face? You look radiant. Victoria noticed second. What's different about you? Did you finally start using actual skincare products? When I told her I'd made my own face cream, she laughed. You made it? Like, in the kitchen? That's so crafty. But then she asked if I could make some for her. That's when hope crept back in. Maybe this was my chance to contribute something valuable. Maybe this was how I could finally prove I belonged in this family. I spent the next 6 months perfecting formulas, researching ingredients, testing products on myself and Maria, who volunteered enthusiastically. The results were incredible. My homemade moisturizer worked better than Victoria's $100 creams. My gentle cleanser was more effective than James's expensive dermatologist-recommended face wash. I started dreaming bigger. What if I could create a whole line? What if this could be my contribution to Hartwell Industries? What if I could prove that the charity case had something valuable to offer? Richard had always said the family business was about providing quality products that improved people's lives. My skincare line could do exactly that. I worked on my business presentation for weeks. Market research, financial projections, product development timelines. I studied Hartwell Industries' existing beauty product line and identified exactly where my products could fit. I even came up with a marketing strategy that played into their existing brand. The night before I planned to present to Richard, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, imagining his reaction. Maybe he'd be impressed. Maybe he'd finally see me as more than just the adopted daughter. Maybe he'd see me as a real member of the family with real value to contribute. Maybe Victoria would stop calling me the charity case. Maybe James would actually ask my opinion about something. Maybe I'd finally have a place at their table that was about more than gratitude and good publicity. I had no idea that the presentation I was preparing would be the final nail in the coffin of my relationship with the Hartwell family. I had no idea that my attempt to contribute would be seen as presumption. I had no idea that my biggest dream was about to become my biggest humiliation. But maybe that was exactly what I needed to finally wake up. The morning of my presentation, I woke up at 5 a.m. Not because I'd set an alarm, but because my heart was racing with excitement and terror in equal measure. I'd been rehearsing my pitch for weeks, but suddenly every word felt clumsy in my mouth. I laid out my samples on the kitchen counter before anyone else was awake. 12 products in small glass jars I'd bought with my allowance money. Each one labeled in my careful handwriting: River's Edge Gentle Daily Cleanser, River's Edge Brightening Serum, River's Edge Overnight Repair Cream. The names felt professional. The products looked legitimate. The results spoke for themselves. Maria found me there at 6, staring at my little display like it might disappear. Big day today, Mija? I'm presenting my business idea to Richard. I couldn't keep the excitement out of my voice. I think he's going to love it. Maria's expression shifted slightly. Something that might have been concern. And if he doesn't? He will, I said quickly. He has to. Look at these results. I showed her the before and after photos I'd taken of my own skin, the detailed ingredient lists, the cost analysis that proved my products could be manufactured and sold at a significant profit. Everything was perfect. Maria picked up the moisturizer jar, unscrewed the lid, and inhaled deeply. This smells like hope, she said softly. I didn't understand what she meant until much later. Richard had agreed to see my presentation during his coffee break, which felt like a good sign. Busy, successful people don't waste time on ideas they're not interested in, right? I'd scheduled it for 9 a.m., after Victoria left for her tennis lesson and James left for his internship at the company. I wanted this moment to be private. Just me and the man I'd spent 10 years trying to impress. I knocked on his study door at exactly 9 o'clock. "Come in, Lana." Richard was behind his massive oak desk, the same desk where I'd waited for homework help that never came, where I'd sat through countless lectures about gratitude and responsibility. But today felt different. Today I wasn't asking for help or apologizing for some perceived failure. Today I was offering value. "Thank you for meeting with me," I began, setting my presentation folder on his desk. "I know your time is valuable." "Of course. What's this about?" I opened the folder and began the pitch I'd practiced 100 times. Market analysis for the skincare industry. Growth projections for organic beauty products. Hartwell Industries' current position in the beauty market and where they could expand. Richard's eyes glazed over about 30 seconds in. "The bottom line," I said, sensing I was losing him, "is that I've developed a complete skincare line using natural ingredients. The profit margins are excellent, the market demand is proven, and I already have the formulas perfected." I set out my product samples, explaining each one. The gentle cleanser that removed makeup without stripping natural oils. The vitamin C serum that brightened skin tone in just 2 weeks. The night cream that had completely eliminated my stress breakouts. "I've been testing these for 6 months," I continued. "The results are consistently excellent. Maria's been using them too, and her skin looks 10 years younger." That's when Richard finally looked up from his newspaper. "Maria? You mean our housekeeper?" "Yes, she volunteered to test the products and—" "Lana." Richard's voice was gentle but firm. "I appreciate that you've been crafting in your spare time. But you're talking about a real business here. You're talking about manufacturing, distribution, marketing, regulatory compliance. Do you have any idea what's involved in bringing a beauty product to market?" My prepared answers died in my throat. I researched the FDA requirements. I looked into manufacturing costs. I have a complete business plan. "Honey." Richard set down his coffee cup and gave me that smile. The patient, indulgent smile he'd been giving me for 10 years. "This is sweet, really. But you don't understand business. You don't understand what real customers want. These little hobby projects are fine for personal use, but they're not commercial products." The words hit me like cold water. "But the results. Results on 2 people don't constitute market research. And frankly, you don't have the background to understand what makes a product commercially viable. Maybe stick to helping around the house? You're good at that." The study door opened behind me. Victoria walked in wearing her tennis whites, her blonde hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail. "What's all this?" she asked, picking up one of my product jars. "Lana is showing me her little skincare hobby," Richard said. Victoria read the label aloud. "River's Edge Overnight Repair Cream." She looked at me with raised eyebrows. Did the charity project just try to teach Daddy about business? My face burned. It's not a hobby. It's a legitimate business proposal with market research and financial projections and... That's adorable. Victoria unscrewed the lid and sniffed. "Lana, you realize you're talking to someone who built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing, right? Maybe focus on things more your speed." James appeared in the doorway, drawn by the voices. "What's going on?" "Our little sister thinks she's the next cosmetics mogul," Victoria said, holding up my moisturizer jar like it was a child's art project. "She wants to sell her kitchen experiments." James looked at my samples, my presentation folder, my carefully prepared charts. "Remember when she tried to improve Mom's cookie recipe? Even the dog wouldn't eat those." They all laughed. Richard chuckled behind his newspaper. Victoria giggled while examining my product labels like they were written in crayon. James shook his head with amused disbelief. I stood there in the middle of their laughter, holding my business plan, and something fundamental shifted inside my chest. For 10 years, I'd told myself that their casual cruelties were just family teasing, that their dismissiveness was just busy people being busy, that their indifference was just the way wealthy families operated. But standing there, watching them mock 6 months of research and development, 6 months of hope and planning and dreaming, I finally saw the truth. They weren't indifferent to me. They were contemptuous of me. I wasn't family to them. I was entertainment. You're right, I heard myself say. I should stick to what I know. Victoria wiped tears of laughter from her eyes. Oh, don't look so serious. We're not trying to crush your dreams. We're just being realistic. We love that you're creative, James added. Maybe you could make some face masks for Vic's spa days. That's actually a great idea, Victoria said. You could be like my personal skincare consultant. Way more fun than buying everything from Sephora. Richard nodded approvingly. See? There are always ways to use your interests within the family. No need to think so big. I packed up my samples in silence. My hands moved automatically, screwing on lids, closing folders, gathering the pieces of my shattered ambition. None of them noticed that I hadn't spoken in several minutes. Thanks for listening, I finally managed. Of course, sweetheart, Richard said, already turning back to his computer. My door is always open. I walked out of that study carrying my rejected business plan and a clarity I'd never experienced before. I wasn't angry. I was awake. For the first time in 10 years, I saw the Hartwell family exactly as they were. And for the first time in 10 years, I saw myself exactly as I was to them. The charity case who should be grateful for their scraps. The adoptee who should know her place. The outsider who would never, ever be allowed inside. But here's what they didn't know about charity cases. We're survivors by necessity. We're observers by training. And we're students of human nature because our lives depend on reading people correctly. I'd spent 10 years learning everything about the Hartwell family. Their habits, their weaknesses, their blind spots. Their business practices, their financial strategies, their network of contacts and competitors. I'd absorbed it all while they were busy teaching me that I was nothing. They thought they were rejecting my skincare line. What they were actually doing was setting me free. I went in my room and pulled out the phone number I'd kept hidden in my jewelry box for 3 years. Dr. Sarah Kim, a biochemist I'd met at a college fair who'd given me her card when I told her about my interest in natural skincare. If you're ever serious about this, she'd said, call me. The cosmetics industry needs people who understand both science and business. I'd kept her card but never called. I was too busy trying to earn my place in the Hartwell family. That afternoon, for the first time in 10 years, I made a decision that was entirely my own. I called Dr. Kim. Dr. Sarah Kim answered on the second ring. This is Sarah. Hi, Dr. Kim. This is Lana Rivers. We met at the college fair 3 years ago. You gave me your card and said to call if I was ever serious about skincare development. A pause. Lana. I remember you. The girl with the fascinating questions about organic compounds. Are you calling because you're serious? Yes. Good. Can you meet me tomorrow at my lab? Bring samples. The next day, I told the Hartwells I was going to the library to study. Instead, I took the bus across town to Dr. Kim's private research facility. I'd packed my samples in a small cooler, along with detailed notes about each formula. Dr. Kim's lab was nothing like the sterile, intimidating spaces I'd imagined. It felt more like a kitchen where scientists played with interesting ingredients. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with short black hair and the kind of focused energy that made you stand straighter. Show me what you have, she said without preamble. I unpacked my jars while she pulled on latex gloves. For the next 2 hours, Dr. Kim tested my formulas with equipment I couldn't even name. She examined the consistency, pH levels, ingredient stability. She asked detailed questions about my process, my sources, my results. Finally, she looked up from her notes. This is graduate-level work, Lana. How did you learn formulation chemistry? YouTube videos. Library books. Trial and error. YouTube videos. She shook her head. I have students with chemistry degrees who can't formulate this cleanly. Your peptide serum is particularly impressive. Where did you source the ingredients? Online suppliers mostly. I researched which compounds were proven effective and figured out how to combine them. Dr. Kim set down her pen. I'm going to be direct with you. This work is commercial quality. Better than commercial quality, actually. Most mass-market skincare is full of fillers and marketing nonsense. Your formulas are scientific and effective. My heart started racing. Really? Really? But taking this from kitchen experiments to actual business requires capital, regulatory approval, manufacturing partnerships, distribution channels. Do you have any of that? I have about $4,000 saved. That's a start. It's not nearly enough for full commercial production, but it's enough for proper testing and small batch manufacturing. The question is, are you willing to commit completely? Because half measures don't work in this industry. I thought about Richard's dismissive smile, Victoria's condescending laughter, James treating my work like a child's hobby. I'm willing to commit completely. Good. Because I've been looking for a partner with your instincts. I can provide the lab access, the regulatory expertise, the business connections. You provide the formulations and the vision. 50-50 partnership. I stared at her. You want to be partners? With me. I want to be partners with your work. This cleanser alone could capture serious market share if we position it correctly. The question is whether you're ready to do this properly. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while the house settled around me. The Hartwells were all asleep, secure in their assumption that I'd accepted my place as the grateful adoptee who should stick to household chores. They had no idea that while they were dismissing my little hobby, I was planning their competition. Dr. Kim had given me homework. Market research on existing skincare brands, analysis of their ingredient lists, identification of gaps we could fill. She wanted a complete business plan within 2 weeks. Don't tell anyone what you're working on, she'd warned. The cosmetics industry is incredibly competitive. Ideas get stolen, formulas get copied. Keep this between us until we're ready to move. I'd nodded, but keeping secrets in the Hartwell house was something I'd been doing for years anyway. The next morning at breakfast, Victoria complained about breaking out from her expensive French moisturizer. Maybe you should try Lana's kitchen experiments, James said, smirking over his coffee. Very funny, Victoria replied. I need actual skincare, not arts and crafts projects. I said nothing. I ate my toast and listened to them plan their days and pretended to care about Victoria's tennis tournament and James's presentation to some potential clients. But inside, I was calculating. My cleanser cost $3 to make and worked better than Victoria's $60 French cleanser. My serum cost $5 to make and delivered results her $100 department store serum couldn't match. The margins were incredible. The market demand was proven. The Hartwells just couldn't see past their own assumptions about who I was and what I was capable of. That worked in my favor. Over the next few weeks, I developed a routine. Mornings with the family, playing the role of grateful adoptee. Afternoons at the library or studying with friends, actually working with Dr. Kim in her lab. Evenings back at the house, helping Maria with dinner and listening to the Hartwells discuss business strategies I was secretly studying. Richard liked to talk about Hartwell Industries at dinner. Market positioning, competitor analysis, supply chain optimization. He spoke about these concepts like they were advanced mathematics, far beyond my comprehension. The beauty market is particularly tricky, he said one evening while cutting his steak. Customers are emotional buyers, not rational ones. It's all about brand perception and marketing tricks. You can't just have a good product and expect to succeed. That's so true, Victoria agreed. Like, I only buy skincare from brands I recognize. Who trusts some random company they've never heard of? I nodded and asked innocent questions. How did new brands establish credibility? What made customers switch from products they'd been using for years? How important was ingredient transparency versus brand reputation? They were teaching me everything I needed to know to compete against them, and they thought they were just making conversation. Dr. Kim and I worked on perfecting my formulas while researching manufacturing options. She had contacts at small batch production facilities that could handle initial runs without requiring massive minimum orders. We found suppliers for packaging, designed labels, researched trademark requirements. The business plan came together piece by piece. Target demographic: women aged 25 to 45 who prioritized ingredient quality over brand recognition. Marketing strategy: direct-to-consumer online sales with emphasis on transparency and results. Distribution plan: start with online sales, expand to boutique retailers, eventually pursue larger retail partnerships. We decided to launch with 5 core products: cleanser, vitamin C serum, moisturizer, night cream, and exfoliating mask. Simple, effective, proven formulas that delivered visible results. We need a company name, Dr. Kim said during one of our planning sessions. I'd been thinking about this for weeks. River's Edge felt too personal, too connected to my Hartwell identity. I wanted something clean, professional, aspirational. Rivera Holdings, I said finally. Rivera. I like it. Sounds sophisticated but approachable. International but not pretentious. What I didn't tell her was that Rivera was rivers in Spanish. A nod to my original name while creating something entirely new. Something that belonged completely to me. The hardest part was the money. $4,000 was substantial for an 18-year-old, but it wasn't enough for everything we needed. Initial production runs, packaging, website development, regulatory testing, legal fees for trademarks, and business registration. Dr. Kim covered most of the lab costs and regulatory requirements as her partnership investment. But we needed another $10,000 minimum to launch properly. I could take out student loans, I suggested. Not enough, and the repayment terms would kill our cash flow early on. We need investors, or we need more personal capital. I knew where I could get more personal capital, but accessing it would require perfect timing and absolute secrecy. The Hartwells kept emergency cash in Richard's home safe. I'd known about it for years because I'd been in his study countless times when he opened it. 5,000 in hundreds in case of emergencies. He'd shown it to me once when I was 12, explaining that responsible families always kept cash reserves. This is for true emergencies only, he'd said. Natural disasters, power outages, situations where banks and credit cards don't work. Starting my business felt like a natural disaster. But taking that money would be theft, plain and simple. And it would be the final bridge burned with the only family I'd ever known. I agonized over the decision for days. Was my business worth becoming a criminal? Was my independence worth proving that everything the Hartwells believed about my character was true? The decision was made for me by accident. I was in Richard's study one evening, returning a book I'd borrowed, when I overheard him on a phone call with his lawyer. Yes, I understand the tax implications, he was saying. But the adoption was primarily for charitable deduction purposes. We've maintained her for 10 years, which more than satisfies the requirements. Once she turns 18 and moves out, we can transition the deductions to other charitable contributions. I froze behind the half-open door. No, there's no legal obligation to continue support after 18, Richard continued. She's not a biological child, so inheritance laws don't apply. We'll help her with college applications and maybe contribute to tuition, but she'll need to understand that she's financially independent now. He paused, listening. Of course we care about her well-being, but she needs to learn self-sufficiency. The adoption was always meant to be temporary support, not lifelong dependency. I backed away from the door on silent feet, my heart pounding. Temporary support. Charitable deduction purposes. Not a biological child. For 10 years, I'd believed I was family. For 10 years, I'd worked to earn my place at their table. For 10 years, I'd accepted their casual cruelties as the price of belonging somewhere. But I'd never belonged. I'd been a tax write-off with an expiration date. That night, I opened Richard's safe and took exactly $5,000. Not a penny more, not a penny less. Enough to launch Rivera Holdings properly, not enough to bankrupt their emergency fund. If I was going to be a thief, I'd be a precise one. The next morning, I gave Dr. Kim the cash. Let's do this properly. Where did you get this money? I've been saving longer than I thought. She didn't question it further. In the skincare business, apparently, everyone had secrets about their funding sources. We ordered our first production run, 500 units each of our 5 core products. Professional packaging, proper labeling, batch tracking for quality control. 2,500 products total, enough to test the market and generate initial revenue. The timeline was ambitious. Production would take 4 weeks, website development another 2 weeks. Regulatory approval was already in progress. We'd be ready to launch in 6 weeks. 6 weeks to transform from charity case to business owner. 6 weeks to prove that the girl they dismissed was more than they'd ever imagined. But the pressure was mounting from multiple directions. Living the double life was exhausting. Pretending to care about Victoria's tennis rankings while planning her competition. Listening to James's business school theories while implementing strategies that could outmaneuver him. Sitting through Richard's lectures about responsibility while building my own empire. The worst part was Maria. She knew I was up to something, but she couldn't figure out what. "You're different, Mija," she said one afternoon while we folded laundry together. Quieter. But also more alive. Like you have a secret that makes you happy. Maybe I'm just growing up. Maybe. Or maybe you're planning something big. I looked at her carefully. Maria had been kind to me when no one else was. She'd taught me practical skills and offered emotional support and never made me feel like a burden. But she was also loyal to the Hartwells. They employed her, paid her well, treated her with more respect than they'd ever shown me. If I was planning something big, I said carefully, would you tell them? Maria stopped folding and looked at me directly. Depends on the something. If it was dangerous, yes. If it was just you finally finding your way in the world, no. What if finding my way meant leaving? Then I'd help you pack. That evening, Victoria announced her engagement to Preston Caldwell, heir to a shipping fortune and exactly the kind of empty-headed trust fund baby she'd always said she wanted to marry. We're thinking a spring wedding, she gushed at dinner. Something elegant, but not too ostentatious. Maybe the country club? Or we could rent the botanical gardens. Richard beamed. This is wonderful news. Preston's a good match for you, sweetheart. His family's business complements ours nicely. James raised his wine glass. To Victoria and Preston. May your merger be profitable for all involved. They all laughed at his joke. Even Victoria giggled instead of being offended. I sat there watching them celebrate the match they'd engineered, the alliance that would strengthen their business and social position, and I realized something profound. They'd never celebrated anything I'd accomplished. They'd never been proud of my achievements or excited about my future. They'd never treated me like someone whose happiness mattered. Because to them, I wasn't someone whose happiness mattered. I was someone whose gratitude they expected in exchange for basic shelter and food. Congratulations, I said to Victoria. I'm happy for you. Thank you, Lana. You'll be my maid of honor, of course. Preston has 3 sisters, so the wedding party will be huge. You'll love his family. They're so down to earth despite having more money than God. More money than God. More money than the Hartwells, certainly. This wasn't just an engagement. This was Victoria securing her financial future by marrying into an even wealthier family. When's the wedding? I asked. 6 months from now. Plenty of time to plan everything perfectly. 6 months. By then, Rivera Holdings would be launched. By then, I'd be financially independent and legally adult. By then, I'd be free to walk away from this family without looking back. I can't wait, I said honestly. Because I couldn't wait to see their faces when they realized the charity case had become their competition. The discovery came 3 weeks before my 18th birthday, when I was supposed to be at the library researching college applications. Instead, I was in Dr. Kim's lab, reviewing the final production samples for our launch. 2,500 units of Rivera Holdings' debut collection, sitting in neat rows across the stainless steel counters. Professional white jars with clean black labels, ingredients listed in elegant typography, my company name printed in subtle gold lettering. "They're beautiful," Dr. Kim said, unscrewing a jar of night cream to test the consistency one final time. "Ready to change the world?" I was about to answer when my phone buzzed with a text from Maria. "Come home now. Emergency." My stomach dropped. Maria never texted me. She barely knew how to use her flip phone for calls. "I have to go," I told Dr. Kim. "Family emergency." "Go. We'll finalize the launch timeline tomorrow." I caught the first bus home, my mind racing through possibilities. Someone was hurt, someone was sick, someone had discovered my business plans. The 20-minute ride felt like hours. Maria met me at the kitchen door, her face pale and strained. "What happened?" I asked immediately. "They know," she whispered, glancing toward Richard's study. "About the money. About your business. About everything." The blood drained from my face. "How?" "Preston's father called Richard this afternoon. Something about background checks for the wedding. They found your business registration, your trademark applications. They know about Rivera Holdings." I felt the world tilt sideways. Background checks. For family members of the bride. Preston's family is very thorough about who they associate with. They investigate everyone who might reflect on their reputation. Of course they did. Rich families protecting their precious bloodlines from contamination by unsuitable connections. "Where are they now?" "Richard's study. They've been in there for 2 hours." Maria's voice was barely audible. "Lana, I heard them talking. They're not just angry about the business. They found the missing money." My legs went weak. I sank into one of the kitchen chairs, trying to process what this meant. "What exactly did they say?" Maria looked around nervously, then sat across from me. "Richard called his lawyer. Something about theft charges and adoption fraud and protecting Victoria's engagement." "Lana, they're talking about having you arrested." The kitchen spun around me. "Arrested? For stealing the emergency money. Richard said you violated their trust and proved you were never really family material." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "But Mija, there's worse." "Worse? How could there be worse? Tell me." I wasn't supposed to hear this part. But after the lawyer call, Richard called Victoria at Preston's house. He told her they needed to accelerate their timeline for getting you out of the house. Something about not wanting the scandal to affect the wedding. I stared at her. "Getting me out of the house? They were already planning to ask you to leave after your birthday. The adoption was only supposed to last 10 years. But now they want you gone immediately, before Preston's family digs deeper into your activities." 10 years. The adoption was only supposed to last 10 years. Did they say anything else? Maria hesitated, then pulled a folded piece of paper from her apron pocket. "I found this in the trash in Richard's study. I think you should see it." My hands shook as I unfolded the paper. It was a printed email from Richard to someone named David Caldwell, presumably Preston's father. "David, thank you for bringing the Lana situation to my attention. We had no idea she was engaging in unauthorized business activities or accessing family funds without permission. Please be assured that this reflects no family connection whatsoever. Lana is not our biological daughter and was adopted through a temporary charitable program that expires on her 18th birthday. We've provided housing and education for 10 years, which fulfilled our legal obligations. She will be transitioning to independent living immediately. Any business ventures or legal issues that arise from her activities are entirely separate from the Hartwell family interests. We deeply regret any concern this may have caused regarding Victoria's suitability as a family connection. Lana's behavior is not representative of our family values or business practices. I trust this clarifies the situation. We look forward to celebrating Victoria and Preston's engagement without any further complications. Best regards, Richard Hartwell." I read the email 3 times before the words fully penetrated. Temporary charitable program. Not our biological daughter. Entirely separate from the Hartwell family interests. Complications. For 10 years, I'd been a complication they were managing. Mija? Maria's voice seemed to come from very far away. I looked up at her, and for the first time since I was 8 years old, I felt completely and utterly alone. They never intended to keep me. I don't think so, no. The whole time, they were just waiting for me to age out. Maria reached across the table and took my hand. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. But even as she comforted me, another realization was crystallizing. They knew about Rivera Holdings. They knew about the money. They were planning to have me arrested and kicked out of the house. Which meant I had maybe hours before they implemented whatever plan they'd been discussing in Richard's study. Maria, I need to ask you something important. How long have you known about their plan to get rid of me? She looked uncomfortable. I suspected something when they started talking to lawyers about post-adoption procedures. But I thought it was just paperwork. I didn't know they were planning to cut you off completely. Did you know about the emergency fund in Richard's safe? Yes. Did you know I took money from it? Maria's silence was answer enough. Why didn't you stop me? Because, she said slowly, I thought if you were brave enough to take it, you must have had a very good reason. And because they owe you a lot more than $5,000 for 10 years of making you feel grateful for basic human decency. I stared at her. You're not going to tell them I'm home? I was never planning to tell them you're home. I texted you so you could decide what to do next. For the first time in hours, I could breathe again. What would you do? If you were me? Maria smiled sadly. I'd pack my things and disappear before they could destroy me. And I'd take whatever I needed to survive, because they sure as hell weren't planning to help me transition to independence. She was right. They weren't planning to help me with college, or finding an apartment, or learning to live on my own. They were planning to dump me with nothing and wash their hands of their charitable obligation. How long do I have? They're waiting for Victoria to come home before they confront you. She'll be here around 8. I looked at the kitchen clock. 6:30. 90 minutes to pack my life and escape before the family I'd spent 10 years trying to please destroyed what was left of my future. But as I sat there contemplating my options, something shifted inside me. The fear was still there, but underneath it was something else. Something harder and cleaner and entirely new. Anger. Not the helpless rage of a powerless child, but the focused fury of someone who'd finally seen the truth clearly. They thought I was going to slink away in shame, grateful they weren't pressing charges. They thought I was going to disappear quietly and never bother them again. They thought the charity case would just accept her fate and vanish. They had no idea who they'd been living with for 10 years. Maria, can you help me with something? Anything, Mija. I need to pack, but not everything. Just essentials. And I need to get some things from Richard's study while they're distracted. What kind of things? The kind of things that prove what they've been planning all along. Maria's eyes sharpened. You're not just running away. No, I'm not running anywhere. I'm moving forward. I had 90 minutes to pack my life and gather evidence. 90 minutes to prepare for a war the Hartwells didn't know they'd just declared. They wanted to cut me off completely? Fine. I'd show them what complete really meant. They wanted to protect their reputation from association with me? Perfect. I'd make sure our association was the least of their reputation problems. They thought I was just a grateful charity case who would disappear when dismissed? They were about to learn that the girl they'd underestimated for 10 years had been paying very close attention to everything they'd taught her about business, competition, and winning at any cost. The only difference was that I'd learned those lessons better than they'd ever imagined. And unlike them, I was about to put those lessons to use against people who actually deserved it. Let's go pack, I told Maria. I have a business to launch. I had 47 minutes to pack my life before Victoria arrived home for the confrontation they'd planned. Maria helped me move through the house like a ghost, gathering essentials while the Hartwells remained locked in Richard's study. Clothes, documents, the few personal items that actually belong to me. Everything fit into 2 duffel bags, which should have been depressing, but instead felt liberating. 10 years of life in 2 bags. At least now I knew exactly how little I'd ever really had. The hard part was accessing Richard's study computer while they were in there. But Maria created a distraction, knocking over a plant in the hallway that required Richard and James to help clean up the soil before it stained the hardwood floors. I had 3 minutes to access his computer and forward myself the emails about the adoption timeline, the background check requests, and most importantly, the financial records showing how much they'd saved in tax deductions by keeping me for exactly 10 years. 3 minutes to document 10 years of calculated charity. The emails painted a clear picture. The adoption had always been temporary. The Caldwell family's background check had simply accelerated their existing timeline. And Richard's lawyer had confirmed that pressing theft charges would create a clean break and demonstrate to the Caldwells that the family takes financial responsibilities seriously. They weren't just kicking me out. They were planning to destroy me legally to protect Victoria's engagement prospects. I forwarded everything to my personal email and cleared the browser history just as they returned to clean up. By 7:45, I was ready. Bags packed, evidence secured. Dr. Kim texted about my escape plan. The business samples were safe in her lab. My production run was already paid for and would proceed regardless of what happened to me personally. At least Rivera Holdings would survive even if I didn't. Victoria's car pulled into the driveway at exactly 8 o'clock. I positioned myself in the kitchen with Maria, pretending to help with dinner prep. Through the doorway, I could see Victoria embrace James in the foyer, then head directly to Richard's study where they'd been waiting. The door closed. Voices rose immediately. Maria and I pretended to focus on chopping vegetables while straining to hear the conversation in the next room. Completely unacceptable behavior. Theft of family resources. Preston's family is already asking questions. Need to handle this before it affects the wedding. 20 minutes of heated discussion before they called my name. Lana, please come to the study. I looked at Maria one last time. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "You're stronger than they are. Remember that." I walked into Richard's study to find them arranged like a tribunal. Richard behind his desk, Victoria and James flanking him like bodyguards. The united front they'd probably practiced while I was upstairs packing. "Sit down," Richard said, gesturing to the single chair they'd placed in front of his desk. I remained standing. "I'd rather not." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "This isn't a negotiation, Lana." "Good. Because I wasn't planning to negotiate." Richard cleared his throat. "We know about your business venture. We know about the money you took. And we know you've been lying to us for months about what you've been doing with your time. That's all true." They clearly hadn't expected me to admit everything immediately. James shifted uncomfortably. "We also know," Victoria continued, "that your actions have created serious complications for my engagement. Preston's family is concerned about being associated with someone who steals from their adoptive family." I can understand their concern. Richard leaned forward. "Lana, we've given you opportunities for 10 years. Education, shelter, support, guidance. This is how you repay that generosity. By starting a business with my own formulas and my own savings? Yes, apparently that's exactly how I repay generosity. Your own savings?" Victoria laughed harshly. "You mean the allowance we gave you? The money we provided? Everything you have came from us, including the $5,000 I took from the emergency fund. You're absolutely right about that." Again, my honesty seemed to throw them off balance. They'd prepared for denials, excuses, tearful apologies. Not calm admissions. "The point is," Richard said, recovering his composure, "your behavior has demonstrated that you're not ready for the responsibilities that come with being part of this family." "What responsibilities are those exactly?" "Loyalty. Honesty. Putting family interests before personal ambition." I almost laughed. "Like the loyalty you showed when you told Preston's father that I'm not really family?" Like the honesty you showed when you never mentioned the adoption had an expiration date? Like putting family interests first when you planned to kick me out the day I turned 18. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria recovered first. How do you know about that? I know about a lot of things. I know this adoption was always temporary. I know you've been claiming tax benefits for charitable contributions. I know you've been planning my exit strategy since before I even understood what an exit strategy was. Richard's face had gone very pale. Where did you get that information? From your computer. From your emails. From your lawyer consultations that you thought I wasn't smart enough to understand. James found his voice. You hacked Dad's computer? I accessed information about my own legal status. Information you were planning to use against me without giving me a chance to prepare. This is exactly what we're talking about, Victoria said, her voice rising. This sneaky, manipulative behavior. This is why Preston's family is concerned. Preston's family is concerned because I'm not actually a Hartwell, and my business success might reflect poorly on your breeding. Let's be honest about what this is really about. Richard stood up abruptly. That's enough. We've tried to handle this as a family matter, but your attitude makes it clear that approach won't work. Handle what is a family matter? Your theft. Your deception. Your complete disrespect for everything we've provided. And what exactly are you planning to do about it? Victoria smiled coldly. We're pressing charges. Grand theft, fraud, whatever our lawyer recommends. Preston's family needs to see that we don't tolerate criminal behavior, even from adoptees. My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice steady. Criminal behavior? Taking money that doesn't belong to you is theft, James said. Starting a business with stolen funds is fraud. Those aren't family disputes, they're felonies. Richard nodded. We've already contacted the police. They'll be here within the hour to take your statement and arrest you if necessary. The room tilted around me. You called the police? We had to, Victoria said. Preston's family expects us to handle this properly. We can't just ignore theft because we feel sorry for you. And your business, Richard continued, will be shut down immediately. Any products manufactured with stolen funds will be confiscated as evidence. Your partnership with Dr. Kim will be terminated. Your trademark applications will be revoked. Everything I'd built over the past 6 months was dissolving in real time. Of course, Richard added almost kindly, if you cooperate fully with the investigation and return any remaining stolen funds, we might be able to arrange for reduced charges. Maybe community service instead of jail time. How generous of you. We're trying to help you, Lana. This is what happens when charity cases forget their place and try to bite the hand that feeds them. There it was. The truth they'd been hiding behind 10 years of fake family warmth. I was a charity case who'd forgotten my place. Where exactly was my place? Victoria answered immediately. Grateful. Helpful. Appropriately humble about the opportunities you were given. Not competing with the family that saved you from foster care. Competing? I was starting a skincare line. You guys manufacture industrial cleaning supplies. Competition is competition, James said. You used our resources, our connections, our last name to build credibility for your venture. I never used your last name. I never claimed any connection to Hartwell Industries. I specifically avoided any association with your business. But people might have made assumptions, Victoria insisted. Preston's family certainly made assumptions about your background and character. Richard sat back down, suddenly looking tired. The point is, this situation has become untenable. For everyone involved. So you're destroying my life to protect Victoria's engagement. We're protecting our family's reputation, Richard corrected. Which, unfortunately, includes protecting it from you. The words hit like physical blows. Protecting it from me? When do I have to leave? Tonight, Victoria said. Before the police arrive. We think it's better if you're not here when they search your room for evidence. Evidence of what? Whatever else you might have stolen. Financial records, business documents, anything that doesn't belong to you. They were giving me hours to disappear before having me arrested for theft. The perfect solution, I'd look guilty by running, which would justify their actions, and they'd be rid of me without having to actually prosecute the charity case they'd kept for 10 years. What about my things? Take what's actually yours, James said. Everything else stays here. I almost asked what they considered actually mine after 10 years of living in their house, but I already knew the answer. Nothing. Nothing in this house actually belonged to me because nothing in this house had ever been mine. One more question, I said. When were you planning to tell me about the adoption timeline? When were you going to mention that I needed to be financially independent at 18? Richard had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. We plan to discuss your transition to independence as your birthday approached. Transition to independence. That's what you're calling this. That's what this is, Victoria said firmly. You're an adult now. It's time to take responsibility for your own life instead of depending on other people's charity. Other people's charity. After 10 years, I was still other people's charity. I nodded slowly. You're absolutely right. It is time for me to take responsibility for my own life. I walked out of Richard's study for the last time, grabbed my packed duffel bags from my room, and headed for the kitchen door. Maria was waiting with a bag of food and a thermos of coffee. Where will you go? She whispered. Dr. Kim offered me her couch until I figure things out. It's not much, but it's somewhere they can't find me. What about your business? I showed her the printed emails on my phone. These prove the theft charges are bogus. The money came from tax benefits they claimed for adopting me. Technically, it was already mine. Will that matter to the police? It will matter to a lawyer who understands tax law and adoption fraud. Maria hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, Mija. You're brave. I don't feel brave. I feel like I'm falling off a cliff. Sometimes falling off a cliff is the only way to learn you can fly. I slipped out the kitchen door into the darkness, carrying everything I owned and leaving behind the only family I'd ever known. The police cars were already in the driveway as I walked down the street toward the bus stop. Behind me, the Hartwell mansion blazed with light, full of people who'd just protected their reputation by destroying the charity case who'd forgotten her place. Ahead of me was nothing but uncertainty, a failed business, potential criminal charges, and the complete isolation of someone who'd lost everything in a single evening. I'd hit the bottom they'd been planning for me all along. But as I waited for the bus in the cold October night, clutching my bags and watching the police search my former bedroom through the upstairs window, I realized something important. Rock bottom was exactly where I needed to be. Because now I had nothing left to lose. And people with nothing left to lose are the most dangerous opponents of all. Dr. Kim's couch was exactly as uncomfortable as you'd expect a lab couch to be. But it was mine for as long as I needed it, and after 3 days of sleeping there, it felt more like home than the Hartwell mansion ever had. You can't live on coffee and determination forever, Dr. Kim said, setting a plate of scrambled eggs in front of me. Eat something. I'd been surviving on adrenaline and fury since fleeing the Hartwells, but my body was starting to protest. Everything ached. My hands shook when I tried to hold my phone. I'd lost 8 pounds in 3 days. The police came by yesterday, I said, picking at the eggs. They want to interview me about the theft charges. What did you tell them? That I'd have my lawyer contact them to schedule an appointment. Dr. Kim raised an eyebrow. You have a lawyer? I will buy this afternoon. I found someone who specializes in adoption law and financial fraud. She thinks the Hartwells case is weaker than they realize. The lawyer's name was Jessica Chin, and she'd been recommended by a legal aid clinic when I'd called them in desperation. Jessica had agreed to take my case on contingency after I'd emailed her copies of Richard's correspondence about the adoption timeline and tax benefits. Interesting had been her only comment after reviewing the documents. Very interesting. Our appointment was at 2 p.m. I'd been dreading it and anticipating it in equal measure. What about Rivera Holdings? Dr. Kim asked. Are you ready to discuss next steps? I'd been avoiding this conversation for 3 days. Our production run was complete, sitting in a warehouse waiting for distribution. Our website was built and ready to launch. Everything was prepared except for the CEO, who was currently homeless and potentially facing criminal charges. I don't know if there are any next steps. The Hartwells might have been right about shutting down the business. Dr. Kim set down her coffee cup with more force than necessary. Excuse me. If I'm arrested, if this goes to trial, if my name gets associated with theft charges, it destroys the brand before it even launches. Maybe it's better to cut losses now. Lana Rivers, that's the most ridiculous thing you've ever said. I looked up at her in surprise. Do you think I invested 6 months of my time and half my equipment budget into someone I thought would fold the minute things got difficult? Do you think I chose a business partner who gives up when rich people get angry? It's not about giving up. It's about being realistic. Realistic. Dr. Kim laughed. You created commercial-grade skincare formulas in your adoptive family's basement using YouTube tutorials. You identified market gaps that companies with million-dollar research budgets missed. You built a complete business plan while pretending to be a grateful charity case. Nothing about you has ever been realistic. She was right, but that felt like a different person. The girl who'd believed she could compete with established brands felt naive and foolish now. That girl had a support system, I said quietly. That girl had somewhere to sleep and money for ingredients and time to experiment. This girl has nothing. This girl has everything that girl had, plus something much more valuable. What's that? Nothing left to lose. Dr. Kim pulled up a chair across from me. When I was your age, I thought I needed permission to succeed. Permission from professors, from employers, from family members who understood what I was trying to build. It took me years to realize that the only permission I needed was my own. It's not about permission. It's about resources. Resources? Dr. Kim gestured around her lab. You think I started with all this? I started in a shared lab space that cost me half my graduate stipend. I slept on friends' couches for 2 years while I built my reputation. I ate ramen noodles for every meal and wore the same 3 outfits to every professional meeting. I'd never thought about Dr. Kim's background before. She seemed so established, so confident in her success. The difference between success and failure isn't starting with advantages, she continued. It's refusing to accept other people's limitations on what you're capable of achieving. What if they're right? What if I really am just a charity case who got too ambitious? Then prove them wrong. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Jessica Chin, calling earlier than expected. Ms. Rivers, I have some interesting news about your case. Can you come in immediately? An hour later, I was sitting in Jessica Chen's downtown office, staring at documents that changed everything I thought I knew about my situation. The Hartwells made a significant mistake, Jessica said, spreading papers across her desk. They've been claiming you as a dependent for tax purposes for 10 years, which means legally, any money they provided for your care was required support, not charity. I tried to follow her logic. What does that mean exactly? It means the $5,000 you took wasn't theft. It was accessing funds that were legally designated for your support. They can't claim it as stolen money when they've been telling the IRS it belonged to you anyway. My heart started racing. So the theft charges are baseless. But there's more. Jessica pulled out another set of documents. I did some research into the Hartwell family's adoption practices. This wasn't their first adoption. They've taken in 4 children over the past 15 years, all through the same temporary charitable program. I stared at her. 4 children. 4 children, all adopted around age 8, all released at age 18, all claimed as dependents for exactly 10 years to maximize tax benefits. The Hartwells have been running what's essentially a tax fraud scheme disguised as charity. The room spun around me. Are you saying this was never about helping kids? I'm saying the pattern suggests the adoptions were primarily financial arrangements. The charitable deductions they've claimed over 15 years total nearly $2 million. $2 million. In tax benefits from adopting unwanted children. What happened to the other kids? That's what we're going to find out. Because if I'm right about this pattern, the Hartwells have bigger problems than explaining why they kicked out their latest adoptee. Jessica leaned forward. Ms. Rivers, I need to ask you something important. Are you interested in getting your life back, or are you interested in making sure this never happens to another child? The question hung in the air between us. Getting my life back meant clearing my name, protecting my business, and moving forward. It meant focusing on my own future and letting the Hartwells face whatever consequences might come naturally. Making sure this never happened again meant going to war. It meant investigating their entire adoption history, exposing their tax fraud, and potentially destroying their reputation and business in the process. What would going after them involve? A federal investigation into tax fraud, an audit of their adoption practices, and a civil lawsuit on behalf of all the children they've exploited. It would be very public, very messy, and very expensive for them. And very dangerous for me. Initially, yes. They'll fight back hard. They'll try to discredit you, destroy your business, paint you as a vengeful adoptee making false accusations. It will get worse before it gets better. I thought about the other 3 children who'd been discarded at 18. Kids who'd probably believed, like I had, that they were part of a real family. Kids who'd been kicked out with nothing and told to be grateful for 10 years of conditional shelter. But if we win? If we win, you get justice, financial compensation, and the satisfaction of knowing no other child will be exploited this way. Plus, your business launches with the kind of publicity money can't buy. Nothing sells products like a story about someone who fought back against powerful people and won. I looked out Jessica's office window at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, the Hartwells were probably celebrating my disappearance. They thought they'd successfully discarded their latest charity case and protected Victoria's engagement. They thought I'd slunk away in shame and would never bother them again. They thought the scared 18-year-old who'd left their house 3 days ago was the same person sitting in this lawyer's office. But 3 days of sleeping on a lab couch and eating ramen noodles and facing the complete destruction of everything I'd worked for had taught me something important. I wasn't the same person. The girl who'd left the Hartwell mansion had still been hoping for their approval, still been seeking their acceptance, still been trying to prove she deserved their love. The woman sitting in Jessica Chen's office didn't need their approval anymore. What do we do first? I asked. Jessica smiled. First, we file a countersuit for adoption fraud and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Then we contact the other adoptees. Then we call the IRS. And my business? Your business launches exactly as planned. In fact, I think we should accelerate the timeline. Nothing says I'm not going anywhere quite like a successful product launch in the middle of a legal battle. I thought about our production runs sitting in the warehouse. 2,500 units of proof that I was more than the Hartwells had ever imagined. How quickly can we move? How quickly can you be ready to change your life completely? I looked at the documents spread across Jessica's desk. Evidence that I'd been exploited, proof that I wasn't alone, ammunition for a fight that would either destroy me or free me entirely. For 10 years, I'd accepted other people's definitions of who I was and what I deserved. For 3 days, I'd been tempted to accept their limitations on what I could achieve. But sitting in that office, surrounded by evidence of the Hartwells' systematic exploitation of vulnerable children, I finally understood something fundamental. I wasn't just fighting for my own future anymore. I was fighting for every kid who'd been used and discarded by people who'd convinced them that gratitude was more important than dignity. I can be ready right now, I said. Good, Jessica replied. Because we're about to teach the Hartwell family what happens when you underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose. 6 months later, I stood in the back of the grand ballroom at the Riverside Country Club, watching Victoria Hartwell's engagement party unfold exactly as she'd always dreamed. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over 200 of the city's most influential people. Victoria glowed in a designer dress that cost more than most people's cars, accepting congratulations and admiring glances as she moved through the crowd with Preston Caldwell, her perfectly bland fiancé. Richard worked the room like the seasoned politician he'd always wanted to be, shaking hands and telling stories about building his business empire from nothing. James stood near the bar, already drunk and loudly explaining his strategies for expanding Hartwell Industries to anyone who would listen. They looked successful, confident, completely secure in their world of privilege and power. They had no idea their world was about to collapse. "You clean up nice," Dr. Kim said, appearing beside me in an elegant black cocktail dress. "Ready for this?" I smoothed the fabric of my midnight blue dress, a designer piece I'd bought with my first real paycheck from Rivera Holdings. 6 months ago, I'd been sleeping on her couch and facing criminal charges. Tonight, I was the CEO of a company that had generated $2 million in revenue since our February launch. As ready as someone can be for total war. Jessica Chin joined us, carrying a leather briefcase that contained 6 months of investigation results. The federal agents are positioned outside. The IRS auditors are reviewing final documents. The other adoptees are all here and ready to speak. We have everything we need. The other adoptees. Marcus Williams, now 23 and working 3 jobs to pay off student loans after being kicked out at 18. Sarah Chin, now 21 and struggling with trust issues after her family disappeared her the day she aged out. David Rodriguez, now 19 and living in his car after being discarded last year. All of them had believed they were alone. All of them had been convinced they were ungrateful failures who disappointed their generous adoptive families. None of them had realized they were part of a systematic fraud that had netted the Hartwells millions in tax benefits over 15 years. "How do you want to do this?" Jessica asked. I watched Victoria pose for photos with Preston's parents, the picture of innocent happiness. Richard was introducing James to potential business partners, building connections that would secure their family's future. They thought they'd won. They thought discarding me had solved their problems and protected their reputation. They thought the charity case had crawled away to die quietly somewhere. "I want to do it exactly the way they would," I said. Publicly, brutally, and with maximum impact. The engagement party was scheduled to include a toast from Richard about family, love, and the bright future ahead. Victoria had insisted on the traditional speeches, wanting every moment of her perfect night documented and remembered. She was about to get exactly what she'd asked for. At 8:30, the band stopped playing and Richard stepped onto the small stage at the front of the ballroom. The crowd quieted, champagne glasses raised in anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for celebrating this joyous occasion with the Hartwell family," Richard began, his voice carrying easily through the room. "Tonight, we're not just celebrating Victoria and Preston's engagement. We're celebrating the power of family, the importance of values, and the bright future that awaits when good people choose to build something beautiful together." The crowd murmured approval. Victoria beamed from the front row, her hand clasped in Preston's. "The Hartwell family has always believed in giving back," Richard continued. "We've been blessed with success, and we've tried to use that success to help others, particularly children who need stable, loving homes." I felt my jaw clench. He was actually using this moment to brag about their charitable work. "Some of you know that we've opened our home to several adopted children over the years, providing them with opportunities they might never have had otherwise. It's been one of our greatest privileges to help these young people transition to independent, successful lives." The crowd was eating it up. Nods, smiles, a few people wiping away tears at the beautiful sentiment. "So tonight, as we celebrate love and family and new beginnings, I want to raise a toast to Richard." My voice cut through the ballroom like a blade. Every head turned toward the back of the room where I stood, no longer hiding in the shadows. Richard's face went white. Victoria's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. James took a step backward, knocking into a waiter. I walked forward through the crowd, which parted like water before me. My heels clicked against the marble with each measured step, the only sound in a room that had gone completely silent. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the sudden hush. "But I think there are some things your guests should know about the Hartwell family's charitable work." "Lana," Richard said, his voice strained. This isn't the time or place. Actually, this is the perfect time and place. After all, you were just telling everyone about how you've helped adopted children transition to independent, successful lives. I reached the front of the room and turned to face the crowd. 200 pairs of curious eyes stared back at me. My name is Lana Rivers, I announced. I was adopted by the Hartwell family 10 years ago, when I was 8 years old. And Richard is absolutely right about one thing. The experience definitely taught me how to be independent. Victoria found her voice. You need to leave. Now. Before we call security. Oh, I don't think you want to call security just yet, I said, gesturing to Jessica Chen, who was making her way through the crowd with her briefcase. You see, I've brought some documents that explain exactly how the Hartwell family's adoption program works. Jessica reached the front of the room and handed me a folder. I opened it and pulled out the first document. This is a financial analysis prepared by the Internal Revenue Service, I announced to the stunned crowd. It shows that over the past 15 years, the Hartwell family has claimed nearly $2 million in tax deductions for charitable contributions related to adoption and dependent care. A murmur ran through the crowd. Richard started to speak, but I continued. $2 million for helping disadvantaged children. That's very generous. But here's what makes it interesting. Every single one of those children was released from the family exactly 10 years after adoption. Every single one was kicked out at age 18 with no support, no transition assistance, and no ongoing relationship. The murmur grew louder. People were starting to look at Richard with confusion and suspicion. In fact, I continued, pulling out another document, the Hartwell family has adopted 4 children over 15 years, claimed maximum tax benefits for each, and then severed all contact the moment those benefits expired. Victoria tried to interrupt. That's not what we provided. You provided temporary housing in exchange for federal tax benefits, I said, cutting her off. Which would be fine, except for one small problem. You represented these adoptions as permanent family placements while treating them as 10-year business arrangements. I pulled out the printed emails I'd stolen from Richard's computer. These are communications between Richard Hartwell and his lawyer, discussing how to transition adoptees out of the family without legal complications. They specifically mention ensuring that the adoptions last exactly 10 years to maximize the benefit period. The crowd was no longer murmuring. They were talking openly, looking back and forth between me and the Hartwells with shock and growing outrage. Richard tried to regain control. These allegations are supported by federal tax records, legal documents, and testimony from all 4 adoptees, I said, raising my voice over his. Marcus Williams, Sarah Chen, David Rodriguez, and myself. All discarded at 18. All told, we should be grateful for the temporary charity. I gestured toward the back of the room, where Marcus, Sarah, and David stood watching. They're here tonight, if anyone wants to hear their stories about the Hartwell family's generous support. Preston Caldwell stepped forward, his face pale. Victoria, what is she talking about? Victoria looked at him desperately. She's lying. She's a disturbed girl who stole from us and... I'm the CEO of Rivera Holdings, I interrupted. A company that generated $2 million in revenue this year. I'm also the subject of a federal investigation into the Hartwell family's tax fraud, which has been cleared of all criminal charges related to my adoption. I pulled out one final document. And as of yesterday, I'm the majority shareholder in Meridian Capital, the investment firm that holds the controlling interest in Hartwell Industries. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's face had gone from white to gray. That's impossible. Is it? Your company has been struggling for 3 years. Your debt load is unsustainable. When Meridian offered to buy out your creditors 6 months ago, you were grateful for the rescue. You never bothered to ask who was behind Meridian's sudden interest in a failing industrial cleaning company. I smiled at the crowd, which was hanging on every word. It turns out venture capital firms are very interested in investing with CEOs who have compelling personal stories about overcoming adversity. My story about being discarded by my adoptive family at 18 was particularly appealing to investors. Victoria's knees buckled. Preston caught her arm, but his face showed disgust rather than support. "So let me clarify the situation," I continued, my voice carrying clearly through the silent ballroom. Richard Hartwell, the man who just spoke about the importance of family values, ran a 15-year tax fraud scheme that exploited vulnerable children. Victoria Hartwell, the blushing bride-to-be, participated in the emotional abuse of 4 adoptees, including calling us charity cases who should be grateful for basic shelter. I looked directly at James. And James Hartwell, the brilliant business strategist, just spent 6 months working for the company that his discarded adoptee sister now owns. James actually sat down hard in the nearest chair. "But here's my favorite part," I said, pulling out a contract. "Last week, Hartwell Industries signed a manufacturing agreement with Rivera Holdings to produce packaging for my skincare line. Richard personally approved the contract." I held up the signed document. He agreed to manufacture supplies for the same business he tried to destroy 6 months ago. The same business he said was just a charity case's kitchen hobby. The crowd was staring in complete fascination now. This was better than any soap opera they'd ever watched. "The contract is quite generous," I continued. "It will keep Hartwell Industries afloat for another year, maybe 2. Of course, it's a subsidiary contract now, since Meridian Capital owns 60% of the company." Richard found his voice, though it came out as a croak. "What do you want?" I looked around the ballroom at 200 of the city's most powerful people, all watching the Hartwell family's reputation crumble in real time. "I want exactly what you taught me to want," I said. "I want independence. I want success. And I want never to depend on other people's charity again." I gestured to Jessica Chin, who stepped forward with another set of documents. "These are federal charges being filed against the Hartwell family for tax fraud, adoption fraud, and conspiracy to commit both. The IRS is also conducting a full audit of your finances for the past 15 years. Victoria started crying. Preston released her arm and stepped away, his family's reputation concerns finally clear. "But I'm not vindictive," I continued. "Hartwell Industries will continue operating under Meridian Capital Management. The employees will keep their jobs. The business will actually improve, since it will finally have competent leadership." I looked directly at Richard. "You, however, will be stepping down immediately. Along with James, who never actually earned his position anyway." The federal agents Jessica had mentioned earlier appeared at the entrances to the ballroom. "Not to arrest anyone yet, but to make their presence known. The investigation will take several months," I said to the room. "But the evidence is overwhelming. The Hartwell family systematically defrauded the federal government while emotionally abusing vulnerable children." I folded the contract and slipped it back into Jessica's briefcase. "I started tonight as Lana Rivers, the charity case who forgot her place. I'm ending it as the woman who owns the company that employed the people who tried to destroy her." I looked at Victoria, who was sobbing openly now. "Congratulations on your engagement, sister. I hope Preston's family doesn't mind being associated with federal tax fraud defendants." Preston was already walking away, his parents following quickly behind. I turned back to the crowd one final time. "The bar is still open and the band is excellent. Please, enjoy the rest of your evening." I walked out of the ballroom the same way I'd entered, alone, but this time by choice. Behind me, the Hartwell family's perfect world was collapsing exactly as they'd planned mine to collapse 6 months earlier. The only difference was that they deserved it. And I'd made sure the whole city was watching when it happened. 2 years later, I stood in the executive conference room of Rivera Holdings' new headquarters, looking out at the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows that actually belonged to me this time. The irony wasn't lost on me. 2 years ago, I'd been sleeping on Dr. Kim's lab couch, facing criminal charges and believing my life was over. Today, I was reviewing quarterly reports that showed Rivera Holdings had become the fastest-growing skincare company in the region. The numbers are incredible, Dr. Kim said, setting down the financial reports. 18 million in revenue this quarter alone. We're officially profitable enough to expand internationally. I smiled, remembering when $18 felt like a fortune. What's the breakdown by product line? The original 5 products still represent 60% of sales, but the new anti-aging serum is performing beyond projections. The peptide complex you developed is revolutionary. The anti-aging serum had been my passion project over the past year. While the Hartwells were dealing with federal prosecutors and IRS auditors, I'd been perfecting formulas that actually delivered the results expensive department store brands only promised. Any word from the European distributors? 3 confirmed partnerships in the UK, France, and Germany. They want exclusive rights to the entire product line. Dr. Kim had become more than a business partner over the past 2 years. She'd become the sister I'd always wanted, the family member who celebrated my successes and supported me through challenges without expecting gratitude in return. There's something else, she said, pulling out another folder. The Hartwell Industries acquisition is finally complete. The federal court approved the restructuring this morning. I opened the folder to find the official documents transferring full ownership of Hartwell Industries to Meridian Capital, which meant transferring it to me. Richard's Industrial Cleaning Company was now a subsidiary of my cosmetics empire. The justice was poetic, but the responsibility was real. Hartwell Industries employed 47 people who'd had nothing to do with Richard's adoption fraud scheme. I'd spent the past year ensuring their jobs were secure and their working conditions improved. What about the Hartwells themselves? Richard pled guilty to tax fraud and got 18 months in federal prison. He'll serve probably 12 with good behavior. James got community service and 5 years probation since he was a minor when most of the fraud occurred. And Victoria? Dr. Kim's expression darkened slightly. No criminal charges, but the civil penalties bankrupted her personally. She had to sell her car, her jewelry, her designer clothes to pay restitution to the IRS. Preston's family cut off all contact the night of the engagement party. I tried to feel satisfaction about Victoria's downfall, but mostly I just felt tired. Revenge had been necessary to protect other children from their exploitation, but it hadn't been personally fulfilling the way I'd expected. The other adoptees? That's better news. Marcus finished his degree with the scholarship fund we established. Sarah just got accepted to medical school. David is managing the West Coast Distribution Center and doing incredibly well. The scholarship fund had been my idea, funded by a percentage of Rivera Holdings' profits. Every adoptee who'd been exploited by the Hartwells received full educational support, plus counseling services to help process the emotional damage. It felt good to transform their suffering into opportunities for genuine growth and success. Dr. Kim, I need to ask you something important. Anything. Are you happy with how this turned out? The business, the expansion, all of it. She looked at me curiously. Why would you ask that? Because 2 years ago, you were a respected scientist with a quiet research practice. Now you're the co-founder of a multi-million-dollar company with international distribution and media attention and constant pressure to grow bigger and faster. And I want to make sure I didn't drag you into something you never wanted. Dr. Kim laughed, the genuine laughter of someone who finds a question unexpectedly amusing. Lana, 2 years ago I was working alone in a lab, making incremental improvements to other people's formulas, publishing papers that 12 scientists would read. Today, I'm developing products that improve hundreds of thousands of people's lives while building a company that supports other women's careers and educates people about real science. She gestured around our conference room, where 5 full-time researchers were developing our next generation of products. You didn't drag me into anything. You gave me the opportunity to do work that actually matters. The question is, are you happy? It was a fair question. I'd achieved everything I dreamed of 2 years ago and more than I'd ever imagined possible growing up in foster care. Financial security, professional success, the respect of my peers, a thriving business built on my own vision and hard work. But the real answer was more complicated than career achievements and bank balances. I'm happy, I said finally. But I'm also different than I expected to be. How so? I thought success would feel like winning. Like proving the Hartwells wrong and showing everyone who'd underestimated me what I was really capable of. And for a while, it did feel like that. I looked out at the city where I'd built my new life from nothing. But now it feels more like finding myself. Like I spent 18 years trying to be someone the Hartwells would accept, and the past 2 years learning who I actually am when no one else's approval matters. And who are you? I considered the question seriously. I'm someone who builds things instead of tearing them down. Someone who creates opportunities for people instead of exploiting them. Someone who understands that real family isn't about blood or legal documents or charity, it's about people who choose to support each other's growth. Dr. Kim smiled. That sounds like happiness to me. My phone buzzed with a text message. Maria, who'd stayed in touch throughout the entire ordeal and had become like a mother to me in the way the Hartwells never were. Dinner Sunday? I'm making those dumplings you love. I texted back immediately, wouldn't miss it. Family dinner? Dr. Kim asked. The best kind. The kind where people actually want you there. That evening, I walked through my neighborhood to the small house I'd bought 6 months ago. Nothing grand or ostentatious, just a comfortable place that belonged entirely to me. The mortgage was in my name, the deed was in my name, and no one could ever take it away or use it as leverage against me. The house represented something the Hartwell mansion never had, true security. I'd invited Marcus, Sarah, and David over for dinner, along with Dr. Kim and Jessica Chen. The 6 of us had formed an unlikely family unit over the past 2 years, bound together by shared experiences and mutual support rather than obligation or convenience. How did the court hearing go? Sarah asked as we sat around my dining room table eating takeout Chinese food. Officially closed, I replied. All restitution paid, all criminal sentences served, all civil penalties satisfied. The Hartwell chapter is finally over. What's next? Marcus asked. I'd been thinking about that question for months. Rivera Holdings was successful beyond my wildest dreams. The other adoptees were thriving in their new lives. The Hartwells had faced appropriate consequences for their actions. I'd accomplished everything I'd set out to do and more. Honestly, I think I want to focus on building instead of fighting. Expand the business internationally, maybe start a foundation for adoptees, definitely continue developing products that actually work instead of just promising miracles. No more revenge plots? David asked with a grin. No more revenge plots. Turns out building something positive is more satisfying than destroying something negative. After dinner, I walked Dr. Kim to her car. The evening air was warm and full of possibilities. Thank you, I said as she unlocked her door. For what? For seeing potential in a scared 18-year-old who showed up at your lab with homemade face cream and no plan beyond proving she wasn't worthless. I didn't see potential, Dr. Kim replied. I saw someone who was already extraordinary but didn't know it yet. She drove away, leaving me standing in my driveway looking up at the stars. 2 years ago, I'd believed the Hartwells' assessment of my worth. I'd accepted their limitations on what I could achieve and who I could become. I'd been grateful for scraps of affection and approval from people who saw me as a temporary inconvenience. Tonight, I was surrounded by people who celebrated my successes, supported my dreams, and valued my opinions. People who'd chosen to be part of my life because they genuinely enjoyed my company, not because they were obligated to tolerate my presence. I'd learned the difference between being wanted and being accepted, between earning love and demanding gratitude, between building relationships and managing charity cases. The girl who'd left the Hartwell mansion with nothing had discovered she'd actually left with everything that mattered: intelligence, determination, resilience, and the ability to recognize people who would support her growth instead of limiting it. As I walked into my house and locked the door behind me, I realized something profound. I wasn't just successful. I wasn't just independent. I wasn't just financially secure. I was genuinely, completely, authentically happy. And that happiness belonged entirely to me. Hey everyone, thank you so much for staying with me through this entire journey. I hope you're all doing amazing wherever you are in the world, and I hope this story reminds you that no one else gets to define your worth or limit your potential. If you enjoyed Lana's story of transformation from charity case to CEO, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories of people who refuse to accept other people's limitations on their lives. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their current situation doesn't determine their future possibilities. The comment section is always open for your thoughts, your own experiences with toxic families or finding your chosen family, or just to tell me how this story affected you. I read every single comment and I love hearing from you. And here's something exciting. Next week, I'm sharing the story of Marcus Williams, one of the other Hartwell adoptees, and how he built his own empire after being discarded at 18. His journey into tech entrepreneurship is absolutely mind-blowing, and you won't believe what he accomplished with nothing but a library computer and pure determination. Until then, remember, the people who underestimate you are giving you the greatest gift possible. They're showing you exactly what you need to prove wrong. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.